Today, when I saw Tel Aviv burning on the news, my hand started shaking on its own. Without thinking, my fingers went straight to my chest, to the spot where a bullet grazed me, back in the Libyan desert, 43. I was just a kid back then, and even now, my body remembers before my mind does. Those images, Iran's missiles, the sirens, the sky lit up. They brought me right back to Danny. He was from Ohio, 18 years old. Showed me a picture of his sister the same day the bomb hit the other side of our trench. War changes names, maps, excuses, but it always takes the same ones, the kids who were just trying to make it home. Listen to this story all the way through, and then tell me, what city are you hearing me from right now? And how does it feel, watching the world repeat something that never should have happened even once? The TV was showing Tel Aviv covered in smoke, and for a second I could taste sand in my mouth. Not sand from here, sand from the desert, North Africa, 1943, when I was just a kid, holding a rifle bigger than my own fear. My name is James Harold Bennett. They used to call me Jimmy. I'm 96 years old. I was born on a small farm in Kansas, grew up between cornfields and dust storms. We were poor, but didn't know it. My mother baked bread in a wood oven. My father got up before the sun to tend the cows. I liked baseball, radios, and climbing the barn roof to look out over the world. It was a simple life, and I would have lived out my days there, in that little patch of land, if I hadn't heard one word on the radio that changed everything. Pearl Harbor. It was December 7th, 1941. I remember the silence in our living room after the announcer described the bombs. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. My father turned off the radio without saying a word. 3 days later, I walked to the train station and signed my name. I was 17 and lied about my age. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to be part of something, to fight, to defend. I thought it would be glorious, like in the movies. Not long after that, I had my boots in the sand of Alabama, in a training camp that smelled of sweat, fear, and cigarette smoke. Dozens of boys just like me, some older, some still with pimples on their faces, all of us carrying that foolish idea of heroism. We had no clue what we were walking into. No one does, not until you see it for yourself. The first time I held a rifle, my hands shook. The sergeant yelled at me for not locking the safety. He didn't know, but my grandpa had this old shotgun, and sometimes we'd go squirrel hunting. But this was different. This was a tool for killing. And soon enough, I'd learned just how heavy that felt. From training to the ship that took us to North Africa, time passed like a blur. I barely slept, ate very little, thought too much. I wrote letters to my mother that I never mailed. I didn't want her to worry. Honestly, I was trying to convince myself that everything would be fine, that I'd come back whole, that none of us would die, but every soldier lies to himself in the beginning. We arrived in Oran, Algeria, scorching heat, mosquitoes the size of thumbs, and that smell of burnt oil and dried blood. War had already passed through there. Ruins, scorched tanks, children with hollow eyes, the kind of scene no school book could have prepared me for. I was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division. Big red one. Right away I knew it was serious. The men around me had hard eyes. Some had fought in Tunisia. They didn't talk much, smoked in silence, cleaned their weapons with calloused hands. I was the new guy, the kid from Kansas, and nobody pays you much attention at first until you prove you can stand when the bullets start flying. The first mission was supposed to be simple. Escort supplies down a desert road, but war never follows the plan. We were ambushed. The Germans were hidden behind a hill. When the first shots came, I thought it was thunder. Then I saw the sergeant go down, chest torn open. The sound was deafening. The ground shook. Sand exploded around us. I hit the dirt, face down, and started praying. Not for myself. For my mother. That she wouldn't get that letter. The one that comes in an official envelope neatly folded with a cold sentence. "We regret to inform you." When I got up, my best friend Danny was beside me, his arm hanging by a thread of skin. He didn't cry, just stared, shocked. I grabbed his helmet, wiped his face with a filthy rag, and told him he'd be okay. I lied. But that lie made him breathe. We came back with half our unit. Trucks came at night to pick up the bodies. I helped carry 4. One of them still had his eyes open, like he was waiting for someone to explain what had just happened. After that, I stopped counting. I stopped asking for names. Your heart dries up like the land around you. The desert was hell. The heat cracked your skin. The food was canned and tasteless. The water hot. We slept on the sand with one eye open. The Stuka bombers came screaming from the sky like metal banshees. That was the worst sound. Even now, if I hear something similar, my spine goes. One night in late March of 1943 stuck with me. We were camped near El Guetar. Orders came to. I couldn't sleep. Sat there under the stars, writing a letter It was for Mary, a girl from my hometown. We were never a couple. She just smiled at me once at the pharmacy. But in that moment, she was my anchor. I wrote that if I made it back, I'd take her to see the ocean. I'd never seen the ocean. And somehow, that seemed like a good plan for after the war. Another comforting lie. At dawn we advanced. It was an ambush. Again. A minefield, barbed wire, machine guns on the hills. I saw 3 men in front of me get blown into the air. The screams were short, sharp, sliced through the dust. I dove into a bomb crater and stayed there for hours. Bullets zipped above my head. Blood tasted metallic in my mouth. When night fell, I crawled out. The trench was about 60 yards away. Every inch felt like a mile. A German soldier spotted me, shot. The bullet grazed my thigh, burned. But I kept crawling. When I finally dropped into the trench, I blacked out. I woke up in a makeshift hospital. My commander said I was lucky. Lucky. I never understood that. What kind of luck is it? To see your friends die and wake up with a scar that never goes away. After El Guetar, I stayed in Africa a few more months before being transferred to Sicily. But that stretch of desert never left me. Whenever I see smoke on TV, like I did today, I go right back there. Doesn't matter how many years pass. Doesn't matter how gray my hair gets. Today I'm just an old man in a chair. My legs ache. My memory fails. But that day in the desert, it stays. The faces of the ones who never came home. The screaming. The smell of gunpowder. The letter I never sent. It's all still here. Quiet. But alive. And that's why, when I saw Tel Aviv in flames today, my heart skipped. Because war is war. Doesn't matter where. It's always a kid holding a weapon he doesn't understand. It's always a mother waiting for a letter she never wanted. It's always someone who survives and carries it forever. And if you listened this far, if you heard every word, then tell me, what would you have done in my place? And one more thing. Where are you listening from? They called it training. But to me, it was something else. A kind of dismantling. A process of taking apart who you used to be, to build someone who could kill without hesitating. The uniform they gave us felt way too big on the first day. A week later, it started to fit. Not on the body, on the soul. They sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia. It was summer. Humid heat, mosquitoes biting through your scalp. We woke up to the sound of yelling sergeants and went to sleep with every bone aching. Running, crawling, shooting, more running. But the hardest part wasn't the physical. It was the silence. The silence inside us. The fear in the eyes of others, trying to look tough. The face of a boy pretending to be a man, hands shaking while holding his first training grenade. I shared a bunk with Louis, a short loudmouth from New York. He talked nonstop. Said his dad had a pizza shop in Brooklyn, and that when he got back he was going to open one of his own. Every night he'd say, "When this is over, Jimmy, you're coming to taste the best damn pepperoni of your life." And I laughed. Because we needed something to laugh at. There was also Carl, a tall guy from Texas. Quiet. He had that kind of stare that made you think he'd already accepted his own death. One day, after a 5-hour march with our feet full of blisters, he asked me, "You think we'll remember this when we're 90? I didn't know what to say. Back then, I didn't think I'd even make it past 20. But now, here I am. And yeah, Carl, I remember. Every damn detail. Training was the same for everyone, but it hit each one of us differently. My body was getting stronger, but my head, it felt like it was starting to crack. Some nights I'd wake up soaked in sweat. I had dreams about gunfire I hadn't even heard yet. Other nights I'd wake up gasping, not knowing why. We learned to swallow everything. The homesickness, the fear, the anger. We swallowed it all and kept marching. Because no one wanted to look weak. And because we didn't know what was coming next. One day, a kid named Eddie passed out during a hand-to-hand combat drill. When he came to, the sergeant told him to get up and keep going. Eddie just stood there, shaking. The sergeant got in his face and said, "In war, nobody stops. You get up or you die." At the time, I thought it was cruel. Now, I get what he meant. But I also understand that some people die before they ever get to war. After 8 weeks, they gathered us all on the field. The commander stood in front of us and said we were ready, that they were forming the units that would ship out. The silence that followed hit like a punch. This was it. The pretending was over. Up until then, we could fool ourselves into thinking this was just a phase. But now, it was real. Louis punched me in the arm and said, "If I die, Look after my mom." I laughed, told him to shut up, but I kept that with me. I still carry it. The night before we shipped out, I wrote 2 letters. One to my mother, told her I was fine, that the food was good, and the guys were great. Lies, but the kind that protect people. The second letter, I never sent. It was to no one. Or maybe to myself. In it, I admitted I wasn't brave, that underneath the uniform, I was just a Kansas farm boy who liked planting corn and listening to the radio with his grandfather, and that if I didn't make it back, I hoped someone out there would know that. On the ship, we all turned into statues. Some threw up, others prayed, some just stared at the ocean. I was one of those, just staring at the horizon, trying to picture what lay ahead, trying to remember the last time I hugged my mother, wondering if she knew it might have been the last hug. One of those long, quiet hugs where nobody says goodbye, but everyone feels it. The trip across the Atlantic felt endless. The ship rocked so hard I thought I'd die from seasickness before even seeing a battlefield. But people don't die easy when they're scared to die. You hold on to life tighter, sometimes too tight. Somewhere in the middle of the voyage, Carl handed me a cigarette and said, "You're going to be good at this." I asked, "Good at what?" He said, "Surviving. You listen, you pay attention." That stuck with me, because I did pay attention, and maybe that's why I never could forget. When we finally spotted land, it felt like another planet. North Africa. The color of the sand looked harsher, the sun closer, the wind dry like a slap in the face. That's when I realized training was over. This was real. This was life and death. This was war. And war doesn't let you go back. What struck me most was the silence. Nobody cheered. Nobody yelled. Nobody raised a fist. Just silence. Like every one of us knew, deep down, that this moment would split our lives in 2. Everything before stayed on that ship. Everything after. We didn't know if we'd live to tell. And right there, stepping off that ship, boots sinking into burning sand, I saw the first body lying in the dirt. We hadn't even started yet, and the war had already introduced itself. We landed in Oran, Algeria, in the early hours of the morning. The heat hit like a slap the moment we stepped off the ship. It wasn't like Georgia. This was dry heat, the kind that cracked your lips before noon and made the inside of your boots feel like ovens. The sky was pale. The ground was a yellow-gray that looked like it hadn't seen rain in years. Nothing moved. No birds. No wind. Just dust. And a body. It was there, maybe 20 feet from where we lined up. Covered with a tarp, feet sticking out, boots blackened and torn. No one said a word, but we all saw it. First day, first hour. That was the welcome. We were moved quickly to a camp just outside the city. Tents, barbed wire, rusted vehicles. Everything smelled like gun oil and sweat. Our gear was thrown into piles. We were told to eat fast, get some rest, and be ready by sundown. I didn't sleep. I lay on my cot, staring at the canvas above, trying to slow my breathing. My rifle was on my chest like a weight, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with metal. That evening, they briefed us. We were heading out on patrol at dawn. A recon sweep through a stretch of desert road that had gone quiet. Too quiet. They said it might be nothing, just a routine patrol. But Louis leaned over and whispered, "Nothing never feels this tense." He was right. We left before the sun. The air was cold then, a fake kind of mercy. 20 of us spread out along the road, walking in silence. Every step kicked up dust that stuck to your teeth. My heart beat loud in my ears. I kept looking at the horizon, the rocks, the ridges. Every shadow looked like a helmet. Every breeze sounded like breath. Carl was up front. I was maybe third in line. Louis was behind me, humming under his breath like always. That damn tune, some jazz thing I never did learn the name of. But I remember the rhythm to this day. About an hour in, we heard it. The snap of a twig, a soft click like metal on metal. Then silence. Then hell. Gunfire erupted from the ridge to our left. Not loud at first, more like cracking branches. Then suddenly it was all-consuming. The air tore open with noise. Sand flew. Bullets snapped past my ears. Someone screamed. I don't know who. I dove behind a rock, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I froze, completely. My hands gripped the rifle, but I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. I just listened. The sound of shouting, boots scraping, metal clanging. The heat rising with the smell of blood and cordite. Then I saw him, just 20 yards ahead, a German soldier standing, reloading, yelling to someone behind him. I should have aimed. I should have fired. But I didn't. I watched him move. I watched the shape of his face, the way his shoulders tensed. He looked young, like me. Then Louis fired. The German dropped. That moment split me in half. Part of me was relieved. The other part? It broke. Because I hadn't pulled the trigger, and because I knew that next time, I would. We regrouped behind some rocks, returned fire for what felt like hours. I remember the heat in my palms from the barrel, the smoke, the shouting, a corporal yelling orders that nobody could hear. Carl moved like a machine, calm, precise, like he'd done this before in another life. I followed him. I did what I was told. I aimed where he pointed. I fired when he fired. At one point, I hit someone. I knew I did. I saw the way he folded, like a puppet with its strings cut. I didn't feel anything, not then, just a coldness, like I'd lost something I didn't even know I had. When it ended, 5 of ours were down. 2 dead. One of them was a kid named Weller. He'd just turned 18. His helmet rolled down the hill, and I remember watching it spin in the sand. I don't know why that stuck with me. Maybe because it was the only thing that moved in that awful stillness. We carried the bodies back on stretchers made of torn canvas and wooden poles. No one spoke. No one cried. You'd think we'd cry, but crying takes more strength than we had left. That night, I sat outside the tent staring at the stars. I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel heroic. I felt hollow, like someone had opened me up and scooped something out. Something I wasn't going to get back. Louis sat beside me. He didn't say a word. Just passed me a canteen. We sat like that for a long time. I think he understood. I think all of us did. Because after your first fight, your real fight, you're never the same again. You stop seeing the enemy as a shape in the distance. You start noticing the details, the hands, the shoulders, the hesitation, and then you realize they're just like you. Boys who didn't ask to be there. Boys who wrote letters to people they might never see again. The next morning, we were assigned a new sector. More roads, more sand, more unknowns. And as I strapped on my gear, I looked at my reflection in a piece of broken mirror. I didn't see the kid from Kansas anymore. I saw a soldier, and I hated it. It happened near El Guitar, March 1943. We'd been marching for 2 days straight. No trucks, no cover, just heat, rifles, and silence. Dust stuck to our tongues. My boots were soaked in blood from blisters I'd stopped bothering to check. Louis's lips were cracked and bleeding. Carl had started walking a little behind, slower, like his body already knew something was coming. The sky was clear. That's the part I remember best. It was too clear. Not a cloud, not a single bird. Just blue, bright, open, perfect. The kind of sky that doesn't warn you of anything. That morning, we were told to move through a shallow valley, rocky on both sides, with a dried-out stream running across it. The lieutenant said it was safe. Scouts passed through yesterday, nothing to report. That valley was a trap. We were halfway across when the first mortar hit. No warning. Just a deafening crack and a wall of earth flying into the air. I remember the sound more than anything. Not the explosion, but the moment after. The way the air sucked in. Like the world held its breath. Then the second hit. Then the third. I hit the ground face first, head ringing, mouth full of dust. I couldn't see. I couldn't hear. Just colors flashing behind my eyes and the taste of iron on my tongue. I tried to scream, but my lungs had locked up. I thought I was dead. Honestly, I did. I lay there waiting for something. Anything. But I was still there. Still breathing. Someone grabbed my arm. It was Louis. He was shouting something, but I couldn't hear him. His mouth was moving like a silent movie. He pulled me behind a rock and pointed uphill. That's when I saw them. German machine gunners had dug in along the ridge. We were sitting ducks. I saw Carl running forward, firing from the hip. His helmet flew off. I don't know if it was the wind or a bullet. I never saw him again. The valley turned into chaos. Screams, explosions, dirt raining from the sky. My rifle jammed after 6 shots. I had to use a bayonet to pry out a casing. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped it twice. Around me, men were crawling, bleeding, some not moving at all. One of them, a guy named Fisher, was trying to put his own guts back into his body like he could undo what just happened. A blast went off 10 feet from where I was crouching. It lifted me off the ground and slammed me into a rock. I felt something tear in my leg, something sharp slice across my face. Then, nothing. Just darkness. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. I came to minutes later, ears ringing, vision blurry. My leg was soaked in blood, but I could move it. My face was burning. I touched it and felt warm, sticky skin. I didn't know if it was mine or someone else's. Around me, silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts. The kind that weighs, like the world had stopped. Bodies, everywhere. Some whole, some not. One of them was Louis. He was lying on his back, eyes open. No blood, no wound I could see. Just gone. I remember thinking, maybe he's just stunned, maybe, but I knew. I sat beside him for a long time. I don't know how long. I didn't cry, I couldn't. Something inside me had locked up, not out of bravery, out of shock. My brain had shut off anything it didn't need for survival. When they found me, I was still holding my rifle like it mattered. One of the medics said I was lucky. That word again. Lucky. I never understood it. What kind of luck leaves you alive in a place full of dead friends? They patched me up, bandaged my leg, stitched my face. I asked nothing. Said nothing. They didn't ask either. That was how it worked. We didn't talk about it. We moved to the next place, carried our rifles, waited for the next hit. That's how soldiers survive, by becoming less human, just enough to keep breathing. That night, I sat alone. My ears still buzzed from the blast. My vision came and went, but my mind was clear, too clear. I kept seeing Louis's eyes, open, empty. I remembered what he said the night before. If I die, don't cry for me. Just eat pizza for the both of us. He'd laughed. He always laughed. I didn't. That's when I realized something had changed in me. A switch flipped. The part of me that believed this would end, that I'd go home whole, it died in that valley. I buried it with Louis, along with whatever was left of Carl, Fisher, and the others. From that day forward, I stopped waiting for peace. I stopped praying to get out. I started preparing to stay in it, for as long as it wanted me. And the truth is, part of me never left that valley. Part of me still hears the mortar fire every time the world goes quiet. Still feels the dust in my teeth whenever the wind blows. Still sees Louis's eyes asking me a question I'll never be able to answer. They pulled me from the valley 2 hours after the last shell fell. I don't remember much of the ride back, just bouncing in the back of a truck, metal rattling, blood drying on my hands. Someone poured water on my face. Someone else said, "He's lucky." That word again. Lucky. I closed my eyes and didn't answer. I didn't want to be lucky anymore. They sent me to a field hospital 30 miles from the front. It was just tents and canvas, cots lined up like graves, the smell of iodine and rot hanging in the air. The medic said my leg was torn but not broken. Stitched it up in silence. I didn't scream, I didn't move. I just stared at the flap of the tent, watching the light flicker. They said I needed a few days to rest. I thought maybe that meant sleeping. It didn't. Rest meant lying there, awake, listening to the moaning of the man in the cot next to mine. He'd taken shrapnel in the back and called out for someone named Sarah every few minutes. He never opened his eyes, just whispered her name like a prayer. I never asked who she was. Across from me was a soldier with no legs. They'd taken him off a truck still conscious. I watched them cut off what was left. He didn't scream either, just stared at the ceiling, lips moving, but no sound coming out. He didn't sleep. None of us did. That was my first time seeing what they called shell shock up close. I didn't know the name for it yet. They didn't explain. But I knew something was broken in those men that couldn't be stitched up or splinted, something that stayed inside and kept moving, even when everything else had stopped. The fourth night, I woke up gasping. I dreamed of the valley again, of Louis, of the way his eyes stayed open, asking me why. My heart was pounding, my shirt soaked through. I sat up, shaking, and the nurse rushed over. She touched my shoulder and said, "You're okay, soldier. You're back." But I wasn't. Not really. During the day, they let us walk a bit outside the tents if we were stable enough. I hobbled out with a cane and stood near a row of cots where others lay in the sun like shadows. That's when I met Marcus. He was from Mississippi, older than most of us, maybe 30. He sat in a wheelchair, legs gone above the knee. But what struck me wasn't that. It was his eyes, completely still, like frozen water. He stared out toward the horizon and didn't blink much. I sat beside him a few times, didn't say anything. Then one day, without looking at me, he said, "You seen your ghost yet?" I asked him what he meant. He said, "Everyone's got one. The one you should have saved. The one you left behind. He shows up at night. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in mirrors." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. After that, we sat in silence most days. I started to notice things. The way the nurses looked tired even when they smiled. The way the chaplain walked slower when he approached certain tents. The way the orderlies avoided eye contact when they moved the bodies at night. We didn't talk about going home. That idea felt foreign now, like something from another life. I began to feel like I'd been born in the war, like the part of me that grew up in Kansas was someone else entirely. They cleared me to return to duty after 9 days. The leg wasn't fully healed, but they needed bodies. That's what we were to them. Warm bodies that could hold a rifle. I packed my gear without saying goodbye. Marcus just nodded when I passed. I didn't ask if I'd see him again. Back near the front, things had changed. The guys I trained with, the ones still breathing, were different. Quieter. Thinner. Their faces were tighter. Older. Some had new scars. Some didn't look at me when I returned. Maybe because they'd seen me nearly die. Maybe because I reminded them they could be next. We got new replacements, fresh kids, 18, 19, clean boots, clean teeth, too many questions. One of them asked me what it was like. Over there. I looked at him and said, "Don't think, just breathe, and don't ever stop moving." That was all I could give him. We went back out on patrol that same week. My leg still ached, but I didn't limp. I couldn't afford to. Pain wasn't a reason to slow down. Not there, not anymore. One night, we bivouacked near an old church that had been bombed to rubble. I found a broken pew and sat for a while, staring at the stars through what used to be a roof. I don't know how long I sat there, just breathing. That was enough. Then I heard it, faint, behind me. A voice. "Louis." I turned fast, hand on my rifle, but there was no one. Just wind, just night, just memory. That was the moment I understood what Marcus meant. He wasn't wrong. We all had a ghost, and mine had found me. It was supposed to be a supply run. That's what they told us. A quick in and out. Drop crates of ammo, pick up 2 wounded guys, get out before sunset. But by 1943, we'd all learned that quick didn't mean safe, and routine didn't mean anything at all. The call came in at dawn. A squad from Charlie Company had been pinned down overnight near a dried-out ravine, a shallow dip in the terrain about 7 miles past our current line. They'd gone in light, got hit harder than expected, and now they were low on food, water, and ammo. Command said there were still 5 alive. Maybe. No confirmation. They needed volunteers. They didn't have to ask twice. Carl would have gone. Louis, too. So I went. There were 8 of us. We loaded what we could into 2 half-tracks, water, field rations, bandages, extra ammo belts, and rolled out just after 0600. The air was thick with dust. You could taste it between your teeth. The trucks rattled like old bones, every bump in the road shaking something loose in your gut. No one spoke. Not really, just glances, nods, small movements. There was a kind of wordless agreement among us by then. No promises, no goodbyes. If you come back, fine. If not, well, the ravine was quiet when we arrived. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, no gunfire. Just the hum of the engines dying down and the weight of the silence pressing on our chests. We moved in slowly, rifles up, nerves buzzing. You start to feel it in your skin. A kind of pressure, like the whole world's holding its breath. The smell hit me first. Metal, sweat, dried blood. Then the buzzing of flies. The first body was near a rock, face down, helmet off. I recognized the patch. Charlie Company. His hands were still gripping his rifle, as if he'd died mid-squeeze. We found the others behind a makeshift wall of sandbags and broken crates. 4 were alive. One had a tourniquet on each leg, soaked red. Another was missing part of his left hand. The third, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19, just kept muttering, "They're coming back. They're coming back." The fourth sat perfectly still, back against the dirt wall, staring into nothing. We didn't waste time. We loaded the wounded onto stretchers, secured the perimeter, and started prepping for extraction. But that's when we heard it. That low, awful whistle. Incoming mortar. We hit the ground a second before the explosion. Dirt, fire, screaming. My ears rang. Again. Always the ringing. And my cheek was cut open by something sharp. We scrambled for cover behind the half-tracks, dragging the wounded with us, returning fire blindly toward the ridge. Figures moved up there, silhouettes with rifles. Snipers. I don't remember how long the firefight lasted. 10 minutes? 30? All I know is, by the end, I'd fired through 4 magazines and couldn't feel my right shoulder. One of the wounded was dead. The kid who'd been muttering. His eyes still open, lips still moving. But no sound now. 2 of our guys were down too. One hit in the chest, the other caught in the blast radius of a mortar. I don't remember their names. That still haunts me. I should remember. But names were one of the first things I started forgetting when everything else got too heavy. We piled what was left into the trucks and pulled out fast, tires kicking up so much dust it felt like fog. I rode in the back, legs shaking, hand on a compress trying to stop the bleeding on my side. One of the survivors from Charlie Company started screaming halfway back, just screaming, over and over. He didn't stop until we reached the medic station. Then he went completely silent. He didn't speak again for 3 days. When we arrived, the chaplain met us at the gate. His face dropped when he saw the blood. He didn't say anything, just started walking toward the tent to make arrangements. That's what they called it. Arrangements. I sat on the dirt back against the wheel of the half-track and watched as they carried what was left of the men inside. Some walking, some not. Some would recover, some wouldn't. And some... They might walk and talk again. But they weren't coming back. Not really. Not the way they left. That was the day I started to realize something. Death wasn't the only way to lose someone out there. Some came back, but they weren't whole. I saw it in their eyes. That faraway look, like something inside had cracked, and no one had the tools to fix it. Not the medics. Not the chaplain. Not time. Later that night, I went behind the tents, sat in the dirt and lit a cigarette. I didn't even smoke back then. Just wanted to feel something burn that I could control. One of the medics joined me. Quiet guy. I never caught his name. He didn't ask mine either. He just looked at me and said, "You okay?" I nodded. Then I shook my head. Then I didn't say anything at all. He didn't press. He just said, "There's a difference, you know, between being alive and still living." That sentence hit me harder than any bullet I'd taken, because I knew exactly what he meant. I don't remember how long it lasted. Could have been days. Could have been weeks. Everything blurred together after a while. Dust, footsteps, bullets, sleep that didn't rest you. I moved, I breathed, I followed orders. But I wasn't there anymore. Not really. We rotated through 3 sectors in under a month. Lost 6 men. Gained 4 replacements. I barely learned their names. One of them called me Sir, even though I was just a corporal. I didn't correct him. I didn't care. I barely spoke at all. We'd go out, do the job, come back, eat if we could, smoke if we had any left, then lay down and stare into the dark until the sun returned. That's how life worked then. Not in days, but in rotations. Patrol. Silence. Fire. Return. Repeat. 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 At some point I stopped thinking about home, not because I didn't miss it, but because thinking about it hurt more than being shot. I couldn't remember the sound of my mother's voice anymore. Couldn't picture the front door of our house, the dog we had. I couldn't remember his name. I started forgetting things, small things, then bigger ones. A kid asked me what town we were near. I opened my mouth and realized I didn't know. I wasn't sure what month it was. I couldn't tell you if it was Thursday or Tuesday. I didn't care. One day, we were clearing a farmhouse that had been shelled the night before. The roof was gone. There was soot in the air, and the walls were riddled with holes like Swiss cheese. We moved in cautiously, checking every corner. In one of the back rooms I found a boy, maybe 11, maybe younger, curled up under a table. He didn't cry. He just looked at me. His eyes too wide, too still. I stared back. I didn't say a word. Didn't help him. Didn't move. I just turned around and walked out. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my tent. I kept trying to feel something. Anything. Anger, guilt, pity, fear. Nothing came. It was like my soul had gone somewhere else. Or died. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? That I wasn't sure if I was still human? That I was becoming what the war needed me to be? Empty, fast, efficient. That I was starting to understand how easy it would be to stop caring. Forever? A few nights later, we were ambushed during a routine checkpoint shift. Machine gun fire from behind a collapsed barn. One of our guys, Eric, got hit in the shoulder and went down screaming. We returned fire, pushed forward, neutralized the threat. It was fast, messy, loud. We did what we had to do. Back at camp, I helped carry Eric to the medic tent. He was pale, shivering, teeth chattering like a wind-up toy. I held the compress on his shoulder while they cleaned the wound. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "I don't think I can do this anymore." I didn't answer. Because deep down, I didn't know if I could either. But I didn't feel that panic anymore, that dread, that ache in the chest. It was gone. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't hopeful. I wasn't anything. I just was. Eric didn't stop shaking. He started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears running sideways down his face as he lay on the stretcher. That moment, that should have broken me. A few months earlier, it would have. But that night, I just stood there, watched him fall apart piece by piece, and I felt nothing. Not disgust, not sadness, not even annoyance. Just air, just quiet, just empty. Later, after lights out, I walked behind the mess tent, into the scrub brush beyond the wire. I didn't go far, just enough to be alone. I sat on a rock and stared up at the stars. It was a clear night, the kind of night that used to make me feel small in a beautiful way, but not anymore. I couldn't connect to anything above me, or around me. I wasn't praying. I wasn't asking for help. I wasn't even wondering what it all meant. I just sat there, and for the first time, I asked myself a question I wasn't ready to hear. If a bullet came for me tonight, would I move? And the worst part? I didn't know the answer. I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to fight to live either. I just wanted silence, the kind that didn't echo with memories, the kind that didn't come with screaming in the distance or the weight of another friend gone. When I got back to my cot, there was a letter waiting for me. From my mother. It smelled like soap and old paper. Her handwriting was neat, careful, full of hope. She told me that the dog was still alive, that the neighbor's boy had enlisted, that the wheat was tall this year. She said, "We miss you, Jimmy, every day." And that broke something in me, not all at once, but like the first crack in frozen glass, because I couldn't remember what it felt like to miss anything, and that scared me more than dying ever had. The first time I felt something again, it was because of blood, not mine. His. We were moving through a small village outside Palermo. The town had been shelled 2 days earlier by our artillery. The buildings looked like broken teeth, jagged walls, crumbled roofs, doorways leading into nowhere. Smoke still rose from chimneys that no longer had homes beneath them. We'd been sent to secure the area, sweep for stragglers, and gather intel. We didn't expect to find anyone alive, but there were survivors. Not soldiers, just people. A woman with her arm in a sling sat on a doorstep as if she was still waiting for breakfast. A little girl with soot smeared across her cheeks stood motionless in the rubble holding a doll with no head. An old man rocked back and forth in the street, his eyes wide, not looking at anything that was still there. It felt like we were walking through the echo of a place, something that used to be real but wasn't anymore. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from everything being taken away. I entered what used to be a house, or maybe a shop, with 2 others from my unit. We were clearing rooms for booby traps or mines, just like always. We moved slowly, carefully, weapons up. There were holes in the walls, glass everywhere, and the smell of burned fabric. In the back, near a doorway hanging off one hinge, I heard a voice. Muffled, weak, broken. "Please." It wasn't English. I stepped forward, signaled to the others to hold, and turned the corner. There, crouched against the wall, was a boy. Maybe 16, maybe less. He was holding someone in his lap. Another boy, smaller, pale, covered in blood. His eyes were closed, his head tilted back, mouth slightly open. There was a deep wound in his gut, and you could tell, you didn't need training, you could just tell that whatever life had been in him was leaving fast or already gone. My rifle was up. My training told me to secure the scene, clear the threat, control the situation. But my arms didn't move. The way the boy held the other, the way his body was curled protectively around him, rocking, whispering something over and over, it stopped me cold. He looked up at me, face smeared with dirt and tears, and said, in broken English, "My brother. He is Finnish." I don't know why it hit me like it did. Maybe because I saw myself in him, cradling Louis in my memory. Maybe because he didn't scream, didn't beg, just asked quiet, like he already knew. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just nodded. His eyes dropped, and he kept rocking. No sound. Just that slow, instinctive movement, like if he rocked hard enough, time might go backward. That night, I sat by myself near the tree line outside the village, watching smoke drift across the sky. I didn't speak. I didn't move for a long time. And then it happened. I felt something. Sharp. Real. Not rage. Not fear. Grief. It came slow, like it had been waiting for months behind a door I'd kept shut. It wasn't loud. It didn't explode. It just poured in. Heavy. Familiar. Honest. And I broke. Not in front of anyone. Not with screams or fists. Just quietly. Just me. Head in my hands. Eyes open. I didn't cry. Not really. It was like the tears were too tired to come. But my chest hurt. My ribs felt like they couldn't hold the weight. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I remembered everything. The letters I didn't send. Carl's silence. Louis's laugh. That cold morning in the valley. The names of the dead. The looks in their eyes right before. I remembered that little girl with the doll. The old man who rocked like the boy did. I remembered the boy's face. Not just his grief, but the way he didn't blame me. That was the part that stayed. He looked at me like I should have saved him. And he didn't hate me when I couldn't. We buried the younger boy the next day. No ceremony, no flag, just a tarp, a shallow hole, and a rock to mark the place. The older brother didn't say a word. He just helped us carry the body, stood beside us as we lowered it, and then walked away. For the rest of the day, he followed our squad but didn't speak. He wasn't with us, but he wasn't gone either. Just there. A ghost that hadn't figured out if it still belonged in this world. That night I was cleaning my rifle when one of the new guys, Thompson I think, sat down beside me. He was young, freckles, quiet most of the time. He watched me for a while before saying, "How do you deal with it?" I didn't look up. "Deal with what?" I asked. "The bodies, the civilians, the kids," he said. "How do you keep going?" I thought about lying to him. I thought about saying something tough, something easy, but I couldn't. I looked at him and said, "You don't deal with it, it deals with you." He frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" I wiped down the bolt, put the rag aside, and said, "You think if you shoot enough, eat enough, sleep enough, it'll go away. That maybe you'll get used to it. You won't. It doesn't get smaller, it gets quieter, it sinks down and waits. You carry it. Even when you forget you're carrying it, it's there." He didn't say anything after that. Just sat with me. Quiet. Didn't clean his gun. Didn't ask more. Just sat close enough that the silence didn't swallow us both. Sometimes that was all we had. Someone breathing near you, so the ghosts kept their distance. A few days later, the boy was gone. No one saw him leave. He didn't take food or water. He just vanished. Like he'd slipped through the seams of the world, disappeared into whatever space still existed outside of war. I hope he made it. I hope he found something better than what we gave him. I hope he forgot my face. Because the last thing I ever want to be in someone's memory is the moment they broke. After that, I wasn't numb anymore. But I wasn't whole either. It was like someone had reassembled me wrong. The pieces still there, but in different places. I wasn't the cold soldier I'd become, but I wasn't the boy who left Kansas either. I was something in between, something quieter, something heavier. I started writing again. Not much, just a few letters. Enough to remind myself that my name was still James, that I still had a mother, that someone out there still thought I was coming home, and maybe, just maybe, I still could, even if I didn't know what kind of man would arrive when I did. The ship docked in New York just after sunrise. It had been quiet during the crossing. No bands, no speeches, no flags. We stood on deck, helmets under our arms, staring at a skyline that once meant everything and now meant nothing. Some guys cheered. Some cried. I just watched. There was a man selling newspapers on the dock, calling out headlines we couldn't hear. It was a normal morning. That's what hit me hardest. How normal it was. I hadn't seen a streetlight in months, hadn't smelled fresh bread or heard car horns or felt pavement under my boots. I stepped off that ship and everything looked smaller, softer, like the world I came from had shrunk while I was away. Or maybe I'd grown into something that didn't fit here anymore. They gave us papers, a handshake, a bus ticket, and a "thank you for your service" that felt more like, "don't talk about it." I sat near the window, watching fields roll past. The closer we got to home, the tighter my chest felt. I knew the roads, the trees, even the color of the soil, but none of it felt familiar. It felt like someone else's memory I'd been dropped into. When the bus stopped in my town, I was the only one who got off. It was a Sunday morning. The stores were closed. The church bell was ringing. I walked the 3 blocks to my house with my duffel over my shoulder and my heart somewhere down in my boots. I don't know what I expected. A banner? A hug? My mother on the porch with tears in her eyes? She opened the door, smiled like she'd been expecting me the whole time, and said, "You hungry?" I nodded. She made eggs. I couldn't taste them. My father came in from the barn half an hour later, wiped his hands on a towel, and shook mine like I'd just returned from the store. He didn't look at my face for long. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe I didn't want him to. We sat around the table and talked about crops and neighbors and how cold the last winter had been. Nobody said the word war. Not once. That part of my life was already gone, sealed off like it had happened to someone else. That first night back in my own bed, I couldn't sleep. The mattress was too soft, the air too still. I missed the sound of boots, of men snoring, coughing, whispering. I missed the weight of my rifle next to me. At one point, I sat up and reached for it, forgetting it wasn't there. My hands shook for a while after that. I didn't turn on the light. I just stared into the dark until morning. People said I looked good, strong. "You made it out in one piece," they'd say, clapping my back like they could knock the war loose from it. I smiled when I had to, nodded when it was expected, but I didn't talk much. What could I say? That I hadn't laughed in months? That sometimes I forgot where I was, even with my feet on Kansas dirt? A week after I got back, I ran into Mrs. Donnelly at the general store. She asked me how Carl was. I didn't know what to say. I just shook my head. Her face crumpled like paper. She didn't cry, not then, but I could see it hit her. The realization that the boy who fixed her roof once wasn't coming back. She touched my arm and said, "Thank you for being there with him." I nodded again, but I didn't deserve thanks. I hadn't been there when it counted. He died alone in dust and fire. I wasn't close enough to hear his last breath. I started working on the farm again. My body remembered how to do things: mend fences, carry feed, drive the tractor. But my mind drifted. I'd find myself standing in the field with a shovel in my hand and no idea what I'd meant to do with it. The smell of gasoline made my stomach turn. Thunder sounded too much like distant shells. Sometimes I'd wake up in the barn, curled in the hay, not remembering how I got there. No one talked about it. My mother started leaving the radio off. I stopped writing letters. Some nights I walked out to the edge of the property and just stood there, staring at the trees, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Sometimes I thought I heard them. Boots, metal, voices in German, but it was always just wind. Always. The only person who didn't look at me like I was broken was my little sister. She was 9 when I left, 11 when I came back. She didn't ask questions. She didn't flinch when I jumped at loud noises. She just sat with me, sometimes reading a book, sometimes playing with a string. One night she said, "You're different now." I said, "I know." She said, "That's okay." That was the closest anyone had come to telling me I was still allowed to exist here. One Sunday, a man from the local paper came by. He wanted to write a story about my heroism. I told him no. He asked again. I said, "You don't want what I've got?" He looked confused, maybe even offended, but he left. Truth is, I didn't want to be a hero. I didn't want a parade. I just wanted someone to understand that coming home isn't the same as coming back. Some nights I thought about the boy in the village, the one who held his dying brother like I held my memories. I wondered if he was okay. I wondered if he'd grown up, if he ever found peace, or if he too was sitting somewhere staring at a place that no longer made sense. Because that's what coming home was for me. Familiar things that didn't feel familiar anymore. Love that I couldn't hold the same way. Silence that didn't heal, only echoed. A body intact, with pieces of the soul still scattered across a desert thousands of miles away. They say time heals. Maybe that's true for some things. Scratches, broken bones, maybe even grief if you're lucky. But war doesn't heal. It settles, like dust. It stops moving, but it never disappears. You learn to live around it, walk through your days with the weight of things no one else can see. Smile with pieces of yourself missing. Talk about everything, except the only thing that shaped you. I never went back overseas. The war ended, and with it, the parts of me that knew how to fight. They offered medals. I took them but never hung them. I put them in a drawer beside the old letters, the ones I wrote and never sent. I got married years later. Had kids. A job. A house with a fence and a quiet porch. From the outside, it looked like I made it. And maybe I did. But parts of me stayed buried. Under sand. Under silence. Under names I never said out loud. I never told my wife everything. She knew not to ask. I'd wake up some nights drenched in sweat, heart racing, and she'd lay her hand on my chest without a word. Sometimes I'd flinch, sometimes I'd cry, but most nights I just stared at the ceiling until the sky turned gray. The next day I'd drink my coffee, read the paper, and go to work, like any other man, like someone whole. When my kids were small, they used to ask if I'd been a hero. I told them no. I told them heroes don't get to come home. I never wanted them to wear my name like a badge. I wanted them to live without ghosts. I taught them how to plant tomatoes, how to fix a screen door, how to look a person in the eye and mean it when they said thank you. That was the closest I ever got to passing something down. I tried once to talk to another veteran. We were at the VA clinic. I saw the way he walked, careful, like every step cost something. I asked where he served. He said Italy. I said North Africa. He nodded. We didn't speak again. but something passed between us. A knowing. You don't have to say much when you've both carried the same kind of silence. Years later, after I retired, I started keeping a journal. Not every day. Just when something stirred. A sound. A smell. A date on the calendar. Sometimes I'd write whole pages, sometimes just one sentence. He didn't deserve to die, or I should have said something, or I remember his laugh. It helped, I think, not to forget, but to organize the mess. Put some order to the chaos I never fully escaped. I never hated the enemy. That's one thing I wish people understood. I didn't see monsters. I saw scared boys who were told to shoot at me before I could shoot at them. I saw a kid die with a photograph in his pocket, another with his mother's scarf tied around his wrist. You don't hate people like that. You just mourn them in silence. You mourn the fact that they too were dragged into something none of us chose. I still think about Louis, about Carl, about the boy in the village with his brother in his lap. I see them more clearly than I see myself some days. Sometimes I wonder if that means they stayed young in my mind while I kept getting older, or if part of me stayed there with them, frozen in a moment the world forgot. Surviving changes everything. People think dying is the worst that can happen in war. It's not. The worst is coming back, and not knowing how to live again. The worst is walking into your own home and feeling like a guest. It's hearing laughter and wondering how long it'll take before it stops. It's watching your children sleep and thinking, please God, let them never know what I know. But I kept going. We all did, the ones who made it. We built lives around the holes. We learned how to function with grief wrapped quiet around our ribs. And sometimes, if we were lucky, we found small peace in the ordinary. A morning coffee, a clean shirt, the smell of cut grass in July. If you're hearing this now, maybe you've never worn a uniform. Maybe you don't know what a mortar sounds like or how heavy a rifle gets when your friend is gone. But maybe you've lost something. Maybe you've carried silence too. If that's the case, then maybe we're not so different. There's something I learned in all those years I didn't speak. Silence doesn't mean strength. It doesn't mean weakness either. It just means you're still trying. And trying, even quietly, is the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. If I could go back, I wouldn't change much. Not because it was right, but because it made me who I am. Scarred, tired, quieter than I used to be, but still here. And sometimes, that's enough. So if you've listened to this whole thing, thank you. For your time, for your ears, for giving me the one thing I never asked for but always needed, to be heard. And now I'll ask you something. What did this story make you feel? And tell me, where are you listening from?